When she chose to adopt not one, but 3 orphan wolf cubs 5 years ago, they made fun of her, calling her reckless and naive. What could have motivated someone to bring these wild animals? Those same people are now retracting their statements. Into her house. And how did this momentous choice change her life and the cubs' destiny on the margins of a tiny, tight-knit community? Gossip spreads swiftly and is frequently fueled by the neighbors' curiosity. So when a lonely woman named Evelyn announced, the whispers quickly started her plan to adopt 3 orphan wolf cubs, and some of them called her. Those who made the careless choice saw it as extremely risky, and few even wondered how someone could allow untamed predators into their house while keeping them raised. A deeper reality about Evelyn's nature was revealed by her raised eyebrows and whispered rumors. Growing up close to expansive woodlands, she had always felt a strong connection to the nature. She listened to the symphony of faraway howling and rustling leaves while spending endless hours investigating secret trails, developing a connection with nature that few could completely comprehend. It was this connection that led her to step in when she found 3 CBS orphaned wolves in danger of starvation, exposed by circumstances she could only speculate about. She felt a protecting instinct that overcame all warnings when she saw their weak, trembling bodies. Danger she had ever heard, and the first responses were as predictable and vicious as close friends separating. Suicide out of terror, as community forums erupted in heated discussions about the sensational headlines the local media printed. Legality and ethical ramifications of her decision, but Evelyn persisted out of a. She set up a room in her remote hut with the serene assurance that she was doing the right thing, gathering everything from customized meals to enrichment exercises that would respect the wolves' innate instincts while preserving them. And the area is safe. What started off as a rescue effort quickly turned into a remarkable adventure that would test Evelyn's determination and challenge all preconceived notions about human-wolf partnerships. 5 years later, this story, which was weaved from threads of doubt, dedication, and a stunning conclusion, left the naysayers stunned. Twist illustrates how sometimes the most courageous choices result from adhering to a. We invite those who are unable to understand to join us as we enter Evelyn's world, learning how her relationship with 3 wild animals rattled, and how she struck a balance between parental attachment and trust caution. The cornerstone of a whole community. Will her courageous acts serve as a source of motivation or a warning? Stay tuned to learn the truth about the wolves' incredible metamorphosis and the day that everyone learned they had been mistaken about Evelyn from the start when Evelyn decided to adopt 3 orphan wolf cubs. Though it would quickly become into an all-consuming commitment before the cubs came, it began with a single act of empathy. She had spent days preparing her remote hut, creating a unique cage with cozy beds, obtaining customized dietary plans for young kinds, and looking through all available resources. Despite the harsh criticism and severe warnings she received from both friends and strangers on wolf behavior, she felt it. There was no going back from the unfathomable sense of purpose that led her there. Something in her heart demanded that. The cubs' entrance was both exciting and terrifying. These wolves were destined to be a part of her life. Tiny, feeble bundles of fur, each with large, curious eyes and a shy demeanor that revealed exactly how. Their fur was patchy, their bones were too easily felt, and they were genuinely fragile. It was evident beneath the surface that they had only just made it through the days following the death of their mother and their first. Evian's fatigue was evident as soon as she arrived, and they cuddled together, releasing piercing, pleading whimpers that weakened her willpower, but in the midst of her own. In order to alleviate their anxiety, Evelyn used a soothing voice that offered gentle cuddles and a quiet, reassuring murmur. During the first week, she found that caring for wolf cubs required more attention to detail than she had previously. Believed that their feeding schedule was unrelenting and that they needed to be bottle-fed every day at strange hours of the night. Each a unique personality of its own, and the biggest one, Ash, whom she hesitantly named, was brave and willing to explore while the little ones, Willow and Frost, were more reticent and would cling to one another whenever Evelyn wasn't there. Cleaning their cage and restocking water became delicate activities that required her to balance her. Despite their natural fatigue, There was a tension in every moment as I tried to connect with them. Misstep and their brittle trust could crumble due to their innate fear of her strange decision. Swiftly expanded to the neighboring community, where innovation could hardly be concealed for very long at the neighborhood diner where neighbors frequently got together to gossip, and rumors about the woman with the wolves spread. Some called her a warning to the community that the cubs would pose a deadly threat once they grew up, while some mocked that it was a self-centered endeavor and an effort by a lone individual to garner attention by using a few voices and outlandish tactics. Despite being quieter, she defended her, stating that Evelyn had always been a kind-hearted person who offered compassion for all living things, regardless of how they may be misinterpreted. As the weeks became months as the cubs' evolution sped up, with Ash being the most audacious of the trio, was the first to test each latch, and Corner Frost grew more and more, pushing the boundaries of their enclosure. Inquisitive, he would bend his head and intently observe Evelyn's movements. Willow remained the most reserved and frequently relied on Ash for guidance when she spoke and shown interest in the objects she carried, her investigations. But even she eventually became receptive to Evelyn's company. Gingery. Every little milestone is a goodie accepted from her hand, and maybe a soft scratch behind the ears. A curious lick and a tail wag seemed like a historic stride in closing the gap between the wild and the domestic during. Evelyn battled her own emotional roller coaster during this time, feeling overpowered by the constant. Taking care of 3 quickly expanding predators turned into a sleep challenge, an elusive luxury that must be constantly monitored, vigilantly trained, and cleaned up after. Workouts that tried her endurance, but every time fatigue threatened to weaken her resolve. She remembered when she first heard the pathetic whimper, she was struck by the cubs' unwavering love. Every time they sought solace from her, these reflections bolstered her determination, igniting her desire to see. Shortly after the cubs' 3rd month in her care, the mission concluded with a dramatic. Evelyn's readiness was put to the test when a challenge arose, because wolf packs are dynamic and hierarchical. Structures rapidly solidify as Willow and Ash Frost become more powerful, with signs of, particularly between Ash and Frost, dominance behavior emerged, and the siblings started fighting in ways that were much more passionate than simple play. And Evelyn discovered that their snouts curled back to show tiny yet pointed teeth. She was conflicted since she needed. When she chose to adopt not 1, but 3 orphan wolf cubs 5 years ago, they made fun of her, calling her reckless and naive. What could have motivated someone to bring these wild animals? Those same people are now retracting their statements. In her house. And how did this momentous choice change her life and the cubs' destiny on the margins of a tiny, tight-knit community? Gossip spreads swiftly and is frequently fueled by the neighbors' curiosity. So when a lonely woman named Evelyn announced, the whispers quickly started her plan to adopt 3 orphan wolf cubs, and some of them called her. Those who made the careless choice saw it as extremely risky, and few even wondered how someone could allow untamed predators into their house while keeping the raised. A deeper reality about Evelyn's nature was revealed by her raised eyebrows and whispered rumors. Growing up close to expansive woodlands, she had always felt a strong connection to the nature. She listened to the symphony of faraway howling and rustling leaves while spending endless hours investigating secret trails, developing a connection with nature that few could completely comprehend. It was this connection that led her to step in when she found 3 CBS orphaned wolves in danger of starvation, exposed by circumstances she could only speculate about. She felt a protecting instinct that overcame all warnings when she saw their weak, trembling bodies. Danger she had ever heard, and the first responses were as predictable and vicious as close friends separating. Suicide out of terror, as community forums erupted in heated discussions about the sensational headlines the local media printed. Legality and ethical ramifications of her decision. But Evelyn persisted out of a. She set up a room in her remote hut with the serene assurance that she was doing the right thing, gathering everything from customized meals to enrichment exercises that would respect the wolves' innate instincts while preserving them. And the area is safe. What started off as a rescue effort quickly turned into a remarkable adventure that would test Evelyn's determination and challenge all preconceived notions about human-wolf partnerships. 5 years later, this story, which was weaved from threads of doubt, dedication, and a stunning conclusion, left the naysayers stunned. Twist illustrates how sometimes the most courageous choices result from adhering to A. We invite those who are unable to understand to join us as we enter Evelyn's world, learning how her relationship with 3 wild animals rattled, and how she struck a balance between parental attachment and trust caution. The cornerstone of a whole community. Will her courageous acts serve as a source of motivation or a warning? Stay tuned to learn the truth about the wolves' incredible metamorphosis and the day that everyone learned they had been mistaken about Evelyn from the start when Evelyn decided to adopt 3 orphan wolf cubs. Though it would quickly become into an all-consuming commitment before the cubs came, it began with a single act of empathy. She had spent days preparing her remote hut, creating a unique cage with cozy beds, obtaining customized dietary plans for young kinds, and looking through all available resources. Despite the harsh criticism and severe warnings she received from both friends and strangers on wolf behavior, she felt it. There was no going back from the unfathomable sense of purpose that led her there. Something in her heart demanded that. The cubs' entrance was both exciting and terrifying. These wolves were destined to be a part of her life. Tiny, feeble bundles of fur, each with large, curious eyes and a shy demeanor that revealed exactly how. Their fur was patchy, their bones were too easily felt, and they were genuinely fragile. It was evident beneath the surface that they had only just made it through the days following the death of their mother and their first. Evian's fatigue was evident as soon as she arrived, and they cuddled together, releasing piercing, pleading whimpers that weakened her willpower, but in the midst of her own. In order to alleviate their anxiety, Evelyn used a soothing voice that offered gentle cuddles and a quiet, reassuring murmur. During the first week, she found that caring for wolf cubs required more attention to detail than she had previously. Believed that their feeding schedule was unrelenting and that they needed to be bottle-fed every day at strange hours of the night. Each a unique personality of its own. And the biggest one, Ash, whom she hesitantly named, was brave and willing to explore while the little ones, Willow and Frost, were more reticent and would cling to one another whenever Evelyn wasn't there. Cleaning their cage and restocking water became delicate activities that required her to balance her. Despite their natural fatigue, there was a tension in every moment as I tried to connect with them. Misstep and their brittle trust could crumble due to their innate fear of her strange decision. Swiftly expanded to the neighboring community, where innovation could hardly be concealed for very long at the neighborhood diner where neighbors frequently got together to gossip, and rumors about the woman with the wolves spread. Some called her a warning to the community that the cubs would pose a deadly threat once they grew up, while some mocked that it was a self-centered endeavor in an effort by a lone individual to garner attention by using a few voices and outlandish tactics. Despite being quieter, she defended her, stating that Evelyn had always been a kind-hearted person who offered compassion for all living things, regardless of how they may be misinterpreted. As the weeks became months as the cubs' evolution sped up, with Ash being the most audacious of the trio, was the first to test each latch, and corner Frost grew more and more, pushing the boundaries of their enclosure. Inquisitive, he would bend his head and intently observe Evelyn's movements. Willow remained the most reserved and frequently relied on Ash for guidance when she spoke and shown interest in the objects she carried. Her investigations, but even she eventually became receptive to Evelyn's company, Gingery. Every little milestone is a goodie accepted from her hand, and maybe a soft scratch behind the ears. A curious lick and a tail wag seemed like a historic stride in closing the gap between the wild and the domestic during. Evelyn battled her own emotional roller coaster during this time, feeling overpowered by the constant. Taking care of 3 quickly expanding predators turned into a sleep challenge, an elusive luxury that must be constantly monitored, vigilantly trained, and cleaned up after. Workouts that tried her endurance, but every time fatigue threatened to weaken her resolve. She remembered when she first heard the pathetic whimper, she was struck by the cubs' unwavering love. Every time they sought solace from her, these reflections bolstered her determination, igniting her desire to see Shortly after the cub's third month in her care, the mission concluded with a dramatic. Evelyn's readiness was put to the test when a challenge arose because wolf packs are dynamic and hierarchical. Structures rapidly solidify as willow and ash frost become more powerful, with signs of, particularly between ash and frost, dominance behavior emerged, and the siblings started fighting in ways that were much more passionate than simple play. And Evelyn discovered that their snouts curled back to show tiny yet pointed teeth. She was conflicted since she needed to protect both the cubs' safety and their natural instincts. The wolves and her neighbors developed a strict RPP by striking a balance between discipline and respect for their innate wildness. Stroll, and one poor decision might have disastrous results, confirming the critics who claimed that disaster would eventually occur around this. Evelyn once contacted an animal behaviorist from a local university to ask for advice on how to foster the wolf's development while keeping everything under control. The behaviorist in her was dubious of the endeavor. After a preliminary evaluation, Evelyn said, "You're surprised by the sincerity and patience evident in her approach. Rearing kids in a borderland between society and the wild, which isn't an easy task they'll ever be able to do." These statements emphasize the delicate balance, Evelyn, and that you must accept the constraints of being fully domesticated, was making an effort to remain still despite the growing difficulties and the impending feeling of doubt. The link deepened in ways that no one could have predicted. Every day between Evelyn and the cubs investigated the thick woodlawns surrounding her cabin, going deeper into the wilderness, but always coming back to the sanctuary that Evelyn gave them was a pattern that progressively shaped them into a family, one that is characterized by shared survival and trust rather than species. Yet the question, could this unorthodox unity endure the unavoidable strain from the outer world, where uncertainty, fear, and regulations posed a threat to destroy everything they had laboriously constructed in the months after the wolf cubs? Willow and Ashen Frosto both became stronger, more self-assured personalities that captivated others. It made the residents of the village uneasy. Evelyn's remote cottage, which was formerly peaceful and modest, became a center of discussion and interest among neighbors attracted by the sight of 3 juvenile wolves. Engage with a human caretaker might unexpectedly drop by in the hopes of catching a peek of the expanding number of, approached with sincere fascination. But there was a persistent, rumor-fueled undercurrent of fear and distrust that these wolves would be a serious threat to the local media once they were fully grown. Sensational headlines began to appear because people were fast to grab onto any unique story. Articles with titles such as Trailblazer and Wolves or The Wolf Lady Naive. A divisive picture of Evelyn was shared during a danger to public safety, and some reporters dominated her. Some depicted her as a crazy, while others showed her compassion and determination as a modern-day guardian of nature, idealist, or a careless criminal who was tinkering with fires under the pretense of dogs. As news got out, more people joined the discussion, transforming Evelyn's little rural home into a source of both respect and scorn in spite of the outside chaos. Established a daily routine in the cabin that gradually strengthened the bonds between Evelyn and her Lupin wards. She got up early to provide the cubs a specific food that mirrored their innate nutritional requirements. She spent her afternoons in the nearby woodland, where she assisted them in cultivating their intuition, enabling them to monitor small animals while educating them to handle challenging terrain and exposing them to water sources. Hai never intended to completely domesticate the wolves. Instead, she wanted to foster their wildness in a way that she nonetheless showed respect for their nature and the human world they lived in. The question of how long they could actually coexist on this narrow strope between civilizations was too persistent to ignore. In the wilderness, the cubs started displaying adolescent traits at around the age of 1. Inclinations to push boundaries, investigate more, and make themselves. Uniqueness. Ash, the biggest, became the Dio pack leader because he was fearless and prone to. Frost, however, was willing to question any perceived limitations and occasionally acted aggressively when he felt trapped. Equally intrigued, but more wary, frequently observing from a distance before trying out new things. When doubt emerged, the smallest and most reserved clung to Evelyn as if looking for comfort while seeing these changes, the animal behaviorist who had become interested in. The circumstances surrounding Evelyn served as a warning as their pack dynamics matured. Will confirm that you must be ready for the fact that they are still wolves at heart and have a relationship with you, but not. This reality check for domesticated canines became more pressing when a neighbor's sheep vanished beneath strange events, even though there was no concrete proof that Evelyn's wolves were involved. The three was accused of predation in tales that spread like wildfire, and angry calls came into neighborhood radio programs, and the small-town rumor mill produced stories about swarms of untamed wolves marauding across farms. Enraged by the unfounded charges, Evelyn put up endless effort to demonstrate her wolf's innocence while providing security. Despite the video footage and proof of the times her cubs were safely caged throughout the alleged event, as stress increased, it became clear how brutally her neighbors had accepted her. Some started lobbying local authorities to demand more stringent rules or even the wolves' removal from. Feeling the strain of public attention, Evelyn took comfort in the subdued validation of her everyday existence with Willow and Ash Frost. Every night, she would watch them play at the edge of the forest, testing their developing skills from the porch of her cabin. Despite her independence, she usually comes back to her side when she sees tails wagging, and she was reminded by Owl Light's eyes of the reasons behind her decision to take this unusual route. It was about protecting a connection to the wild that so many people have, not just about saving three orphan creatures appear to be afraid of or misunderstand, and a few fans rallied around her on social media. Others who liked the notion of living alongside nature's more aggressive residents shared her images and discussions regarding whether or not such stories, which use hashtags like Shaka's Wolves, Andis, and nature cohabitation, partnerships could be sustained, and I think Evelyn's actions are an example of how people and animals can coexist. One internet commentator yet stated that animals could learn to respect one another. A voice of support gave way to one of skepticism or alarmism, warning that the wolves will eventually return to their behind the scenes predatory tendencies started to create legal challenges for a few. Public safety concerns were brought up by local officials who were swayed by outspoken critics, wondering if Evelyn had the required licenses or if there were rules against keeping apex predators in a home. The idea of restoring wolves to the wild also gained popularity. Some people thought that after they were completely developed, the only appropriate course of action would be to release them into a wildlife sanctuary or a Evelyn was at a crossroads in the rewilding effort as the wolves crept closer. The conflict between her desire to protect kids and the truth of their natural wildness as they get older. Around this time, a seemingly harmless visit from a local threatened to destroy her painstakingly constructed world. Once more, the television crew altered the story when a reporter arrived to record a program about the wolf lady with the intention of, instead of sensationalizing the tale of a single woman cohabitating with predators, they managed to capture a really poignant moment. Ash, despite his now dominant stature, he showed affection by tenderly nuzzling Evelyn's hand. Trust Frost and Willow, unquestionably but gently accepted the treats from her palm in the video. Aired locally and then extensively disseminated online, caused a stir of rethinking as many realized that these wolves were sentient beings, not dumb animals, and they appreciated Evelyn's care. It was a brief victory, but when the wolves drew closer, it planted doubt in the minds of her most critical critics. The fragility of their living with humanity became more evident during their 2-year mark, when the loads of fear, rumors, and the wolves themselves, now at an age where territorial instincts came to the surface, faced increasing official scrutiny. With their cries at night, for people increasingly challenged Evelyn's property's limits. A chorus that once grew loud and resonant, resembling a wild lullaby to Evelyn. This is an area that neither compassion nor the law could completely control. Block work for you. Should I proceed to the next phase? 0 words. 3 develop. Initial twist or major revelation. Shortly after the local television program on the Wolf Lady broadcast a wave of The community experienced a wave of cautious optimism, and some of Evelyn's harshest detractors tempered their positions on. Observing her interactions with the wolves and her careful attention to them online, a small but vocal group of supporters started pushing for an official program that would give Evelyn the authority to keep the wolves under certain rules, claiming that her achievements may act as a model for ethical human-wildlife relationships. But simply, as tensions appear to be easing, an unexpected turn of events threatened to undo Evelyn's fragile progress. It started with following a string of disturbing incidents, some anxious farmers' little cattle began disappearing under enigmatic events, despite the lack of concrete proof linking Evelyn's wolves to the community's collective memory. The local radio station, which had previously reported on previous reports, rekindled concerns. Her narrative with a mixture of interest and suspicion, which has now intensified accusations. Evelyn was terrified because she knew that Ash had returned to the wolves' predatory ways. Willow and Frost could hunt if they were really in a pinch, but she had carefully monitored their whereabouts using feeding regimens and regular check-ins to guarantee that, despite cattle losses, they never had to roam for food, piled up menacingly, and many of the town citizens who were determined to clear her started to feel more terror than compassion. Evelyn began looking into the disappearances on her own after learning the wolves' identities and collecting photographic proof of footprints that, in her opinion, did not correspond to her wolf's smaller footprints and spaced differently from a wolf's precise stride. What was most confusing was the existence of strange clumps and scratches of dark fur she found on the edges one evening while cleaning the sceneries. She discovered what appeared to be a patch of rough, matted fur snagged on a sheep that had just been lost from a farm fence. It was evident from the faint glow of her flashlight that this fur was coarse and black, unlike the lighter coats of her wolves, which at the time seemed like a revelation, a sliver of concrete evidence that made clear Ash. With her heart racing with anticipation, Evelyn bagged the fur with Frost and Willow, the idea of showing this proof to the local government. But when she looked more closely at the barrier, the scratches that went down her spine looked eerily like they might have been created by a much larger predator, a bear or a renegade dog. But a deeper suspicion kept coming back to her, suggesting that something even stranger could be. Evelyn told Officer Ryan what she had discovered while wandering these woods the following day. The local police officer who had previously cautioned her about the dangers of keeping wild wolves, although initially he was doubtful of her endeavor. But after seeing the connection she had made with the cubs and looking at the fur, he warned that although it didn't match Evelyn's wolf, it does indicate a solution to our situation, that something else might be at play, possibly even an unidentified or hybrid predator. His remarks caused a stir-up. Evelyn's fear that the town's suspicions of another predator were the cause of the cattle killings might result in reckless vigilantism, which could put her wolf in risk nevertheless. At the same time, rumors of a weird beast prowling the woods propelled the local rumor mill by sporadic reports of a big, dark monster at night. Some even proposed that the beast might be the product of illicit crossbreeding experiments between domestic dogs and wild apex predators on internet forums, rife with conjecture that combined sensationalism with genuine worries about public safety. While a portion of as the society intensified its efforts to blame Evelyn's wolves, more and more tolerant locals started to suspect tension increased dramatically due to a hidden threat that had nothing to do with her, and many people demanded that the law take quick action. Enforcement to protect farms and families out of concern for the safety of the wolves. Evelyn stepped up her measures, increased the size of the fenced area surrounding her home, and installed a camera system to keep an eye out for any intruders at night and put an end to them. The neighborhood's worries. So she asked a few doubtful neighbors to come to her cabin and observe how carefully she oversaw social contacts, exercise, and the wolves' diet for some of the observing Ash, Frost, and Willow rump together while occasionally trotting at Evelyn or licking her hand. Heel was transforming. Even if they weren't convinced, they were at least willing to. The potential that these specific wolves were not the terrifying creatures they had dreaded, but rather the current wave of public opinion appeared to be shifting when a local adolescent vanished close to the woods, sending another shockwave through the village. The tragedy instantly rekindled people's worst concerns, prompting search parties to be created and dispersed in all directions. Despite the lack of concrete proof connecting the wolves to the teenager's disappearance, a fury broke out on. Authorities are being urged on social media to address the wolf issue before additional damage is done. Occurred in the community, and old divides reappeared, driven by panic and a desire for simple, sensational headlines and harsh posts from trolls raised questions about Evelyn's whole project. She was forced to defend herself and go on the defensive once more. Ryan, a wolf from knee-jerk condemnation, intervened to remind everyone that the missing teenager might have faced a variety of threats in the environment, from mishaps to actual predator assaults by animals completely unconnected to Evelyn's pack. A thorough inquiry was started, looking through all of the leads except the tension in the town reached unprecedented levels. Rumors of vigilante action started to circulate, and more than. People began to wonder if a misdirected hunter may soon turn his sights on Ash after one shot was fired in the dark of night. Evelyn struggled with whether Frost or Willow was engulfed in a storm of suspicion and terror, sorrow, rage, and an unwavering devotion to the wolves, whom she regarded as her family. This was now a battle for their very survival, not just a disagreement about whether or not she could keep them. Survival, and perhaps her own reputation as she carried on with her daily regimen of training, grooming, and feeding. Could her relationship with the wolves endure the wave of fear and distrust that suddenly swept the town? Unbeknownst to everyone but a few, a significant piece of information was going to come to light that may either confirm the dark clouds rolled up over the wolves, sealing their doom for all time. The small town's melancholy tone reflected the turbulent undercurrents that engulfed its residents in the aftermath. Fear at the teenager's disappearance hung over her like the silence before a storm. Evelyn paced restlessly in the remote cabin, divided between growing anxiety for the every word she heard in town about the missing teen was whispered behind her by wolves she loved and adoring. She was aroused by whispered tones in the diner or plastered throughout local social media. When she realized that any disaster may be attributed on her beloved Ash, Frost, and Willow, despite their own innocence, the pack noticed their caregivers' growing concern, with Ash being the biggest and most spirited, started to patrol the gated area more regularly, responding with an alert to Evelyn's tight posture. Alertness, Willow and Frost, sensing the tense mood, huddled nearer too. Even the regular feeding times have changed when their adoptive mother moved around the property. The wolves' once playful mealtime mood was replaced with an undercurrent of hurry and protectiveness. Despite their inability to explain the intricacies of a human civilization, they appear to understand that something was amiss outside of their enclosure. The wildlife behaviorist who had previously given Evelyn advice returned for another visit among these worries. A woman of few words and keen observation, she carefully recorded Ash's increased defensiveness. The behavior stated that when he periodically bares his teeth at strange sounds, it's a reaction to your stress. Wolves are extremely sensitive to emotions, particularly those with whom they have developed a link. If you're nervous or scared, they'll reply in kind, even intensifying defensive actions. The statement strengthened Evelyn's determination to uphold a composed facade while acknowledging that her emotional stability directly affected the pack's behavior. Yet the weight. She struggled to maintain her composure as the town's suspicions and the missing teen Chris weighed heavily on her. Meanwhile, the local government became increasingly forceful in there. As public pressure for prompt action grew, they stepped up patrols in the forest and close to Evelyn's property. At night, the flashlight beam occasionally moved along the tree line, accompanied by the soft hum of police enforcement using radio to announce the presence of uneasy uniformed personnel. Evelyn and the wolves. But the true danger was that the panic in society could encourage more drastic actions. A bullet hole was found in a fence post close to the enclosure this morning, but no one took credit for it. The message was clear. Some people have decided to handle what they saw as an increasing threat on their own. During this chaos, Evelyn's primary supporters, Emily, and her family organized They hosted a number of informal gatherings at their house where they invited local media and skeptic townspeople to see how Evelyn engaged with the wolves in the hopes of allaying concerns by candid communication and openness throughout these unofficial sessions. The cubs, now large, powerful subadults, would approach visitors warily while being watched over by Evelyn. Some guests left clearly moved by Ash's presence, proving that they could be kind and receptive to her instructions. Similar impressions of wild animals, such as Frost cautiously taking a nibble from Evelyn's palm or nuzzling her hand, disagreed with the loving show, but for many others, the wolves' immense stature and fierce gazes served to reinforce their hidden worries. It just takes a single snap, they would murmur, backing away with doubt. In the middle of these, it was challenging to resolve the conflict between empathy and primal fear. Emotional difficulties. A sliver of optimism appeared in Officer Ryan, who had previously had grave concerns about Evelyn's project and discovered some proof that would clear the wolves. Following the teen's abduction, he conducted a search close to the river and found footprints and scattered items that suggested that the missing kid may have ventured far beyond the wolves' typical range because the tracks were more. There were no indications of wolf tracks nearby, and the activity was more in line with human activity than with skulking animals. Although not conclusive, the hint strengthened Evelyn's belief that her pack was not at fault, and she hoped that the hunt would result in a solution, the teen's safe return, or at the very least, answers that would allay the town's concerns. The camera footage Evelyn had gathered still revealed the specter of corporate or rogue predators. Sightings of a big, dark-furred animal wandering the grounds of neighboring properties, a figure that didn't resemble. Despite sharing this video with local authorities, the progress in recognizing the wolves' unique coats. While the enigmatic predator was slow, the town's concerns increased with. Many locals are demanding that any wolves deemed a threat be eliminated right away. We cannot sit around while. A local farmer objected at a town meeting that something prowls our woods. If it's not her wolf, it's another. In any case, beast, the terrible weight of suspicion keeps us unsafe. Late at night, in the quiet haven of her cabin, Evelyn's beliefs faltered, and she considered taking extreme action, moving the wolves far from a population that wouldn't welcome them, or giving them over to a wildlife refuge. Every suggestion seemed like a betrayal because she had assured the cubs, back when they were young and defenseless, that she would care for them and protect them. The idea of relinquishing that duty broke her heart, but she watched them walk and became restless in their cage, reminding her that the strain was also affecting them. Jack, however, the careful observer, saw that a definitive conflict would be necessary to move forward. A discovery or incident that would compel the community to face its misunderstandings head-on in quiet contemplation. Talks with Emily and the wildlife behaviorist, he came to the conclusion that the unknown predator was the genuine one. Something that was only briefly captured in dark clips could reappear in a way that would demonstrate the wolves' innocence. Nevertheless, they were constantly concerned that such a clash might turn violent. There were many ethical considerations while deciding whether to actively hunt this beast down or wait for it to attack again. Complexity. Evelyn vehemently resisted any, her eyes red from restless nights. Fatal method. She might argue that we preserve life, but two wrongs don't make a right. Terminate it. The relationship between Evelyn and her wolf persisted despite the weight of these choices pressing down like a storm cloud. The pack's unflinching faith in her was her sole constant, and they looked into her eyes every morning to reassure her that wasn't always certain she could supply, and every night the cries that came from her land used to be mesmerizing. Unbeknownst to everyone but a select few, the lullaby turned into a chilling warning that there was not much time left to address the situation of allies. A series of events was about to take place that would force both humans and beasts to undergo a last, drastic change. A sense of urgency started to creep into the community as each day went by in their quest to live fearlessly. Evelyn was still adamant about protecting her three cherished wolves, Ash, even if the day offered more uncertainties than answers. After a disturbing string of incidents, the local authorities put Frost and Willow's unwavering commitment to the test. Had yet to recognize the big, dark-furred beast seen on CCTV close to the missing teen's last known area, making everyone uneasy as whispers of the wolves persisted in the persistent At night, reports of an enigmatic predator threw a lengthy shadow over the entire village and raised new questions. Could there be a secret factor escalating the conflict between humans and wolves in the area? Social media and public forums flourished as new theories surfaced using hashtags such as unknown predator armchair detectives and the U-wolf debate, hypotheses that range from a zoo animal that escaped to a covert breeding experiment intended to create a better. Evelyn's wolves were a particularly feared apex predator, according to one theory, maybe joining forces with the unknown entity, announcing that her entire rescue operation was a part of it. Complex, albeit weird, trick, yet sensible minds rejected such absurd allegations, but they continued to stoke popular skepticism as fresh theories blended with old tales, blurring the distinction between. As the tension increased, a reclusive neighbor became an increasingly frightening blend of truth and hyperbole. Unexpected side story. Mr. Miller, an elderly guy who lived off a lengthy dirt road, was stooped. Neighbors afar from any reported a number of odd disruptions on his property. Twice in the middle of the night, he heard little creatures bleating in fear after hearing guttural snarls. Discovered the bodies of wild deer next to his porch when he woke up, as though a predator had left offerings or warnings there. He claimed to have seen glowing eyes in the dark at his doorstep, although they did not frequently match the soft glow. Seen in Evelyn's fenced-in area, already anxious about the missing teen, many started blaming Evelyn's wolves once more, but Mr. Miller acknowledged that he wasn't sure those eyes. Told Officer Ryan that they were too high up, and they seemed to be staring at me as if they wanted me to notice them. A surprising corporate angle emerged, further confusing issues. A rich landowner whose business had long considered expanding into the forest returned with new plans for a gated development that one developer is allegedly behind secretly. He supported his claim that wild predators were responsible for the strange animal incidents by using the area's surveillance data, was dangerous and had to be taken out of circulation. His slick marketing materials. At town gatherings, he painted a picture of peaceful suburban streets, taking the place of what he described as dangerous backcountry terrain for. The developer's drive against Evelyn sounded unsettlingly personal, as if he were using the wolves as a scapegoat to discuss his real estate goals in private. Late-night conversations with Emily and Jack, she voiced concerns that the frenzy around the missing adolescent, may be being fueled by interest to hasten deforestation and rid the area of safeguarding wildlife laws, as contradictory reports and fresh accusations surfaced. Longtime neighbors found themselves at conflict as the local feeling of unity was weakened. A group led by parents worried about the safety of their kids called for an immediate ban on hazardous predators. Another group, enthralled by the sightings of Evelyn's wolves in the neighborhood, was wolves and any other unidentified creatures. News outlets united under the aegis of wildlife conservation, claiming that recent events were caused by invasion of natural areas that is not caused by Evelyn's well-kept charges. Town hall gatherings turned into yelling contests when friendships were strained and solutions were developed. In the midst of human chaos, Ash Frost and Willow become increasingly evasive. Ash the Bold saw a slight but major increase in pack dynamics. If the leader detected anxiety around the property, he began acting more aggressively, bristling at the Frost is still wary despite the faintest strange smell coming from the edge of the forest. As though sensing Evelyn's need for assurance, he started to hover protectively around her, trapping Willow in the middle. She paced the enclosure with signs of concern, showing empathy for Evelyn's increasing distress and commitment to her siblings. Evelyn experienced multiple instances of conflict that went beyond the fence line, woke up to the howling of the wolves at night, echoes of the communal turmoil, and a terrible situation outside the boundaries of her land. Evelyn contacted knowledgeable wildlife rescue groups in order to stop the spiral of suspicion and anxiety in. She asked nearby counties if they had policies in place for when wolves were raised in captivity, exceeded their cages, or if there were any specialized sanctuaries that may be of assistance. Her requests were answered by ambivalent reactions. However, some shelters had expertise rehoming and rehabilitating untamed dogs. The thought of embracing a bonded pack that lived so near to humans made them shudder. Her need was heightened by the frequent rejections, and she began to worry about how one catastrophic event could lead to a deadly reaction from terrified residents or dishonest. In the meantime, officials captured the unidentified predator in hazy trail camera film. The teen's last known location was still a frightening mystery. Every new piece of information that surfaced online fueled further conjecture. In some pictures, the animal appeared to slink on all fours like a big dog, while in others, it stood erect like a bear. A few images displayed unsettling, reflected eyes that were glinting through the foliage and conveying, gives local police enforcement, even the most courageous watchers, goosebumps. Overwhelmed with advice and flimsy hypotheses, found it difficult to distinguish reality from hysteria, and became increasingly frustrated when several attempts to locate the beast produced fur samples that turned black or footprints that disappeared in the rocky terrain. Among all these subplots of corporate exploitation and social strife, the conclusion is unclear. The pack's internal transformations and an unknown predator create a sense of impending danger. Crisis swept across the forest, and Jackie, always prepared with his camera, recorded every suspicions that a single revolutionary event would soon force everyone to face the fundamental question. Was it possible for humans and wolves to live along peacefully, or was fear and the delicate harmony Evelyn had created as the sun set each evening and painted the sky would be destroyed by miscommunication? The cries of ash frost and willow resounded in solemn hues of purple and crimson. Every night, Evelyn stood at the edge of the trees, listening to an eerie and beautiful chorus. The edge of the fence, her heart racing as she sensed a tipping point approaching, the silent looks she shared with. Although her wolves appear to advise us to get ready for whatever comes ahead, neither the pack, nor they could have predicted the events that would shortly take place and strained every bond in every way. Assumption to the extreme in the last attempt to gain freedom and comprehend the unpleasant. The false peace that descended upon the community was a flimsy one that concealed the simmering tensions beneath it. Now, Evelyn's previously straightforward routine of taking care of Willow, Ash, and Frost has become a never-ending balancing act. Public relations issues, legal concerns, and the constant attention to detail needed to handle 3 maturing wolves every day started with the same commitment to feeding and caring for the pack's cage, guaranteeing their mental and physical demands were satisfied. But each peaceful minute felt more valuable as, despite being lifted from an impending battle that might break out at any moment in the dark silence of the early dawn, she would frequently discover the wolves standing quietly by the fence, staring off into the distance toward the pines, where legend has it that the enigmatic, the predator's anxious yet strangely contemplative postures suggested that they sensed. As she labored to strengthen the enclosure's borders and keep them safe, there was a lot of restlessness in the air. She also noticed that they were growing a little restless and yearned for greater independence than her property could provide. Support herself, she battled an increasing fear that if even one of them slipped away to follow some call of the blowback from the town may be swift and harsh, but local. As officials continued to discuss Evelyn's pack's future, some contended that moving the wolves to a far-off. Others said that sanctuary was the most sensible way to avoid endangering the community and the wolves themselves. That doing so would destroy the relationship she had worked so hard to create and possibly doom the wolves to a life of confinement in a sterile setting at hot public events. It wasn't. It's rare for her to get incisive inquiries with hardly concealed animosity. Are you ready to take full accountability if they betray someone? Or how can you be sure they won't flee off and hunt our livestock? Despite the fact that these encounters were exhausting, she refused to back down from them. Despite the distrust and anxiety that were all around her, she had people who believed in her. Especially those who had seen firsthand how kind and wise the wolves could be when under her care. But Evelyn was aware that beneath her strong exterior, a silent panic gwed at her single violent event, such as the wolves fleeing the area or the unidentified predator attacking more livestock. Late at night, when her mind wouldn't stop racing, she went over previous notes because she thought that enclosure might sway the balances irrevocably. providing guidance on how to harness the wolves' natural instincts in a healthy manner. The wildlife behaviorist included puzzle feeders and led them on planned excursions beyond the enclosure while keeping an eye out for possible watchers, and exposed them to more difficult training routines in an effort to meet their individual mental and physical needs. Small victories like persuading Willow to accept a new guest's presence in a composed manner serve as a reminder that the wolves had developed from frightened cubs to strong but kind friends, although she had a keen awareness that their future was simultaneously in jeopardy. For a while, the unsettling rumor that livestock losses were caused by a concealed predator persisted like a cloud that refused to boost. Every new appearance caused internet controversies, with some claiming that evidence with this unidentified species, wolves were creating a savage pack, while others advanced wilder speculations of a covert operation to create super predators in the dark corners of the forest. Law enforcement is overpowered by, due to contradicting information and pressure from terrified residents. It was challenging to have a reasonable conversation about. Official declarations that were carefully crafted to prevent hysteria simply acknowledged that, while encouraging people to stay, an unidentified animal may be to blame for recent cattle mishaps. Fear increased with each passing moment, but calmness was the last thing everyone was thinking about. Threatening to destroy all of the goodwill the wolves had gained, Emily was trapped in this maelstrom. Who had previously only appreciated Evelyn's devotion, took on a more active role and started a social media campaign with the goal of. She shared brief videos of the pack and touching tales of her time spent with the wolves in an effort to debunk falsehoods. Those moments of tranquility when you cuddle Evelyn or softly play with puzzle toys. Though skepticism flourished in an environment of worry and incomplete truths, coexistence occasionally moved reluctant bystanders. Emily persisted in holding a small community gathering to humanize the wolves with limited resources. She frequently said, "People dread what they don't comprehend due to attendance and strict safety procedures. But if they see, given how much these animals actually trust Evelyn, perhaps they will think about the idea that they are not the reputed monsters." While these grassroots initiatives attempted to change the public's perception, there was a raging undercurrent of fear persisted as hardliners and pro-wolf sympathizers fought at town halls, resulting in contentious debates that threatened to get out of hand in more reserved online forums. However, references to armed vigilantes or self-appointed guards had started to emerge in a more ominous narrative, who would decide to remove alleged dangers even when Evelyn wasn't directly threatened. Or every look at Ash, who was tall, muscular, and proud, made her wolves and the whispers of such extremism weigh heavily on her soul. Told her that in these times, a misinterpreted gesture of wildness may easily be mistaken for hostility. Tensions. Evelyn and her pack continue to share brief moments of sincere affection as captured by Jack's camcorder. Peaceful evening spent observing Willow bring her a toy without asking, or the steadfast Frost place his head on her lap. Every time Ash talked, there were pictures in her eyes that conveyed affection and a link that went beyond terror, while the rest of the world appeared to be split between alarm and a cautious, loving middle ground. But Jack's video revealed a third possibility. There may be ground, or it may be one that is difficult and full of misunderstandings. The mysterious predator that was still lurking around the borders of farmland cast a shadow over them all. Unresolved livestock losses and mysterious footprints kept the speculative craze going, threatening to cast the final, damning shadow cast on the wolves in the event that any incidents coincides with the signs of their wandering. A quiet countdown appeared to be running in the minds of all the people in the village until proof. In the end, either good or wicked would show itself and determine whether the wolves could stay or whether terror and the fragile bond Evelyn had so diligently cultivated would finally be extinguished by censure. The harsh taste of, like a winter fog, uncertainty lingered over the town, influencing every action and permeating every conversation. While Evelyn remained steadfast in her resolve to keep Ash Frost and Willow safe, the prospect of a final confrontation became too intense to disregard recent reports of sightings of the notion is fueled by an unidentified predator who is tall, dark, and terrifying. As some locals worriedly muttered that vigilantes were collecting under cover of darkness with the intention of settling the wolf, tensions reached a boiling point. It didn't matter to them if Evelyn's pack was innocent anymore. All they saw was the danger of Fong and Claw increased the strain, and the local government started to cave in. It wasn't because of the persistent demands of anxious farmers and restless residents, a formal crackdown, but there was a sense of unavoidable creep that made every knock on Evelyn's door possible. Pivotal moment one evening. Officer Ryan showed up with a courteous but serious demeanor, explaining that although her wolves were directly linked to cattle disappearances or the atmosphere of fear in the case of the missing teenagers, your pack might not be guilty, he added, adding that he had become too erratic to ignore. Selecting his words carefully, but the risk involved has never been greater. Therefore, we cannot ensure there or your safety if. The realization that someone chooses to handle things alone struck Evelyn like a harsh reality check. For the first time, she gave real thought to a plan of action she had feared, moving the wolves to A. She had already made preliminary inquiries about a specialist sanctuary, because most sanctuaries were overcrowded and cautious of A. Maybe that was preferable to the growing danger of an enraged pack that had coexisted so closely with humans. Every day, a neighbor brandishing a firearm seemed to spread new tales of rash nighttime shooters. Scouting the outside of her land for any indication of the danger, Emily observed how the weight was pressing down. In an attempt to calm the situation, her friend planned a final round of open houses. She intended to portray the true nature of living with the wolves in order to soothe the anxiety of the community. The daily discipline lessons, the planned training, the enrichment activities that kept them interested, and stopped useless hunting. A small group of people gathered on a clear Saturday morning, made up of local reporters, a few inquisitive fans, and cautious townspeople. Willow and Ash Frost carried out a few basic instructions in the fenced yard. Wait for them to arrive. In response to Evelyn's assured cues, their untamed splendor was on full display. But it was also tinged with a serenity that, for a little moment, gave promise to the notion that they were mindless killers. Flared in the attendees' eyes, but it was fleeting in the midst of online reports of yet another nighttime attack on animals close to the forest's edge caused mild applause. Coupled with shaky phone footage of a massive figure creeping through the night, the scene's setting and timing. Warning signs that are close enough to Evelyn's land to implicate her pack, yet far enough away to be unclear. At the open house event, she sensed the growing distrust and the sounds of what were likely those wolves once more. Tension between the visitors increased like storm clouds above them, and things became serious when a small group of, following the protest, heavily armed guys arrived with icy, accusing looks rather than genuine enthusiasm. They made no, "We'll see you around," one of them mumbled before dropping his hand, despite the fact that they were blatant threats, but their presence spoke volumes. Every nerve in Evelyn's body warned her that the cliff she had feared was now there, lingering on the butt of a hunting rifle. Right under her feet, she was torn between the escalating violence outside and the wolves' increasing restlessness inside. Struggled with painful choices. Could she bring herself to remove Ash Frost and they left Willow, the only house they had ever known, to face an uncertain future in a distant asylum, and she was running the risk of a worse outcome if she waited, hoping that logic and evidence would prevail. Jack records every heartbeat in the first scenario, which involves vigilantes or terrified residents taking preventative action. Of the unrest brought the tale closer to its flash show in private conversations. He discussed the potential resurgence of the unidentified predator with Emily and the wildlife behaviorist. That offered unquestionable evidence of the wolf's innocence, or, in the worst situation, and his camera was always by his side as he recorded the event that would determine their fate. At night, expecting for a final testament in the event of disaster or a chance appearance by the true culprit. Frost showed fresh symptoms of anxiety, which increased the tension as he prowled the bristling fur, gazing into the forest from the edge of the enclosure, as if feeling something just outside. The pack's home took on a sharp, urgent tone late at night that no longer sounded more like a warning than a call to the wild, as though they were attempting to keep something menacing at far. Evelyn wondered if the unidentified predator was hiding because of their joint alertness, closer than anyone thought, strengthening her belief that her wolves weren't as dangerous as people thought. But maybe. As the last vestiges of daylight faded into a tense twilight, guardians warned of a genuine threat. The conflict between the town's frail existence and the wolves looked imminent. When widespread anxiety reaches its breaking point, anyone could take the next step. A resentful neighbor. Whether it was the official's miscommunication or the eerie monster hiding in the woods, Evelyn was certain that the time was running short, and every decision she made going forward would decide whether Ash Frost and Willow had a future in the only house they had ever known, or if this remarkable period of cohabitation would come to an end. The uneasy Cal in town felt more like a portent than sadness, confirming the critics who had earlier dubbed her insane. A break as though everyone was waiting for the next spark to light a powder keg of terror and frustration. Evelyn attempted to keep up her regular schedule with Ash, Frost, and Willow in spite of the foreboding tension. Trying to maintain some sense of normalcy, she made her rounds every morning, checking the fencing around the cages for any new indications of tampering, looking for footprints or strange disturbances, and making sure her pack. The wolves frequently poked their noses through the wire mesh to observe her because they could sense her cautious apprehension. Their silent, inquisitive, and stoic acceptance of the risky circumstances only strengthened Evelyn's. Unwavering in their support, Emily and her family intensified their community in an effort to keep them secure. Additionally, they asked local small groups to watch the wolves' eating schedules and interactions with the pack. Ash showed his persistent uneasiness in these closely monitored sessions, with Evelyn seeking to calm him. Dominant presence without resorting to violence, while Frost lingered close by, more composed in the company of strangers, but always vigilant, and, as usual, Willow was reticent and needed encouragement to move forward. Most guests left shocked by how well managed the surroundings appeared to be and how the formerly vilified predators reacted to a mild leading hand, but prejudice and rumors proved to be obstinate enemies for every bystander who was disarmed by the meek wolves. Cooperation. Another muttered that it would not be long until primal impulses took over. Despite reports of sightings, Officer Ryan's investigation into the unidentified predator came to a standstill. Despite a few trail cameras, no solid evidence to identify the monster surfaced across the periphery. Intriguing glimpses of a huge, shadowy person crossing in moonlight were captured in the images. Clearings, but none offered sufficient information to verify species or intent. Instead, it seemed as though the beast purposefully avoided leaving a noticeable trail that would have led to conjecture about its shrewdness or intelligence despite the livestock losses. Continuing intermittently, but persistently raising the town's level of worry. The persistent question: if Evelyn's wolves weren't hovering over every damaged fence and missing hen, what would hunt in the night? As Evelyn scanned the property, she detected small changes within her pack that mirrored the mounting strain. Lying more frequently would tense at the smallest strange noise. Frost observed Evelyn's every action as though attempting to feel her emotions before responding, and Willow's mild dependence grew more intense. She had an almost continual yearning for intimacy, and anytime Evelyn got close, she would pour at the enclosure fence as though she was afraid of. Every day's rush of adrenaline seemed to soak into the wolves as well, creating an even closer bond between them. Evelyn attempted to remedy this by adding more sophisticated enrichment activities while increasing their collective stress. Puzzle feeders play complex hide-and-seek games with fresh perspectives, but their eyes remained tense. In private, she considered moving them to a sanctuary, and in the middle of the night, she would pace. The vow she made to the wolves when they were defenseless puppies and the escalating conflict in her tiny living room. Realizing that the neighborhood might never embrace them, she flung flyers from distant facilities that offered specialized. Reading the tiny print on public space, socialization, and public visitation, each choice felt like giving up. Could she really distance herself from the animals that she had raised since birth and would put in an unfamiliar setting, perhaps behind more limiting human interaction and erecting fences truly respect their relationship? Developed as her skepticism increased, and corporate interests brought a new level of complicate matters. The land developer who wanted to turn the woodland into a profitable suburban sprawl area was caught. Every cattle incident and speculative rumor about the unidentified predator should be used to support the need for protective measures. His glossy pamphlets made the case that a controlled purging of wild dogs, including Evelyn's, would pave the way for modern. The local government's subtle mutterings about Ta's successful development suggested that influential business backers might already have an impact on policy decisions. The strain placed on the mayor's office, which had to deal with the duel. Cries of frightened locals and hungry investors every day, the public of developers. Assertions grew bolder, depicting a bleak landscape dominated by dark creatures are the ideal excuse for raising the earth in an unexpected way. Police officer Ryan discovered a puzzling connection between the missing teen's last days and the developer's activity. Knowing the location of building plans submitted years prior to proposed extensions into previously. Some basic roadways have been cleared without the public's knowledge or consent because the area was too far away for straightforward construction. The tracks close to these secret routes had slight similarities to those identified nearby, which was a breach of environmental regulations. Marks of heavy machinery laid on an inexplicable paw of a lost farm animal. Although there were no conclusive prints linking these clues, the mystery became more sinister if the developer's secret acts had agitated a hybridized or relocated predator, which might account for the occasional feed towns and cattle raids. People's desperate attempt to place the blame on Evelyn's wolves while Emily's online. Campaign. Wildlife advocates from nearby areas started sharing her posts, showcasing Evelyn's surprise pals. Stories flowed in about wolves serving as a symbol of how humans and top predators might survive under proper control. Reports of tamed bobcats, cougars, or even rescued foxes from remote locations that resided in specialized. Every narrative suggests that the boundary between wild and domesticated was not as absolute as many thought, as a small but vociferous faction gained confidence from the swelling tide of digital support. People in the town who viewed the wolves as living examples of empathy winning out instead of a threat. They organized a grassroots coalition out of fear, putting pressure on the local government to stop any hasty decisions until the actual predator was discovered and to look into the developer's covert expansions before allowing the woodland to be permanently changed. But despite all the support, it was obvious that a significant event would be required to shatter the. Nonetheless, the tension between the ghostly predator and the wolves remained taut as a wire with one incorrect tone. Since the symphony as a whole might fall into anarchy at her cabin, Evelyn went through the rituals of eating and exercising with grim resolve, never lowering her defenses on any given night. As she walked beyond the enclosure, anxious looks were cast over her shoulder, looking for eye movements. The wolves sensed her increased vigilance in the darkness and reflected her. Cautious ashes unprovoked, haunting, low growl at night indicated he too felt a presence hovering just beyond the lamplight's circle in that tense environment, turning every day of peace into a strange countdown to an impending apocalypse in which the unidentified predator might retaliate. The creator could urge the quick eradication of the local wolves, or a neighbor who is afraid may start shooting at the first sign of danger. Provocation. The woodland appeared to be on the verge of a revelation as it exhaled its ancient silence. Either affirm Evelyn's steadfast faith in Willow and Ash Frost, or the uneasy alliance between Evelyn's wolves and the deepest horrors that plagued every part of the community's imagination. On the verge of a crisis, tensions in the neighborhood waned daily, increased as new cattle losses were recorded, each one fueling public outrage without any concrete proof linked Willow or Ash Frost, but the unidentified predator remained elusive, casting a pall of suspicion. Evelyn repeatedly hovered over the pack before waking up to the sound of gunfire in the distance, breaking the stillness of the night. Despite the fact that her wolves were unharmed yet, the message was painfully obvious. Dread was turning into desperation, and deathly errors could result from desperation. And the most disturbing revelation came from a set of trail cam. Exasperated farmers who live in the forest's low-resolution clips shared videos that revealed a massive form within human stealth, It glided through the moonlit woods, its eyes glaring eerily in the darkness with every fresh movie caused a flurry of online conjecture. Some said it was only a big stray dog, while others vowed it was a road bear or a long-lost hybrid wolf-dog breed that was produced covertly, but that no one could identify with confidence. And that lack of understanding served as a fertile environment for fear hashtags such as mystery predator, and local feeds were blanketed by wolves at war, turning the discussion into a divisive event where half the community requested essential safety precautions, while the other half begged Officer Ryan to remain composed. Frazzled by the increasing pressure, he was targeted by the faction and the conservation-minded camp, urging a cull despite his initial skepticism about Evelyn's endeavor. He had grown to appreciate her perseverance and sympathize with her situation. He would phone Evelyn at night to talk about any fresh leads. Footprints discovered close to farmland, first splatters caught on shattered fences, and the majority of LED, if not Evelyn's wolves. Then nowhere is answering the crucial question: what precisely was threatening the periphery at this upheaval turning point? The moment came when a local teenager who was a vocal opponent of Evelyn put on a live. With his boldness and social media influence, he managed to go past the stream challenge to look for the wolves in the forest. At dusk, the cabin's perimeter was determined to demonstrate that the pack was still at large and posing a threat to human safety. His live video stream unexpectedly halted with a jolt of terror rather than recording Ash Frost or Willow. A dark, towering form flickered in the distance, and then the camera lowered, leaving spectators to stare at the ground and only hearing frantic breathing. The feed abruptly stopped, and an abrupt silence descended onto the internet. Threat a foreboding incident that stoked the town's worst fears. Search groups went into work, spreading out along the pine-laden trails with dog teams and spotlights. Going through each, police lines crackled with disjointed reports of strange tracks found in a tree while searching for a sign of the missing adolescent. Trees with deep claw scars and disrupted soil pools that indicated a fight that occurred in the forest at night reverberated with the howls of faraway animals and the cries of anxious parents. Ultimately, the teen was discovered sitting atop a short birch branch, confused but still alive. He shook and gripped his phone as he rambled about a huge silhouette pursuing him, saying it was much larger, greater than any wolf, despite its weariness, with eyes that shone green in the moonlight. Even though he was unharmed, the terror in his eyes increased the town's paranoia in light of this near-catastrophe locality. When officials called an emergency meeting at Town Hall, staff members poured out into the hallways and the lawn outside where restless media and worried locals demanded answers on. Officer Ryan was among the officials on stage, and the mayor, who was hesitant, faced. A group of people with strong emotions requested that the wolves be moved or killed outright, while others begged the community to must concentrate on revealing the real, unidentified predator. Evelyn, who is sat in the front row, felt every accusing gaze as if it were a bruise encircled by a cacophony of harsh voices. She clung to the quiet comfort that Willow and Ash Frost had stayed safe in their enclosure, as shown by time-stamped video that she had painstakingly gathered, but she was well aware that information alone might not be sufficient in an atmosphere of growing anxiety as the meeting took an unexpected turn due to a tense researcher from halfway through. A neighboring county arrived, pale and breathless, and he showed off the rainy infrared film that had been taken. Despite the poor lighting, the footage clearly shows a prohibited area of woodland where illicit logging has allegedly taken place. Revealed a huge animal standing on all fours, its coat black and matted, its ears pointed strangely, its gait was strange, and it was taller than any known wolf. The image froze on the screen, capturing the oddly enlarged appearance of its muzzle. The crowd gasped as the creature took a step, and the researcher had good cause to think this. Maybe an illicit hybrid, a long-rumored dark beast, or perhaps an X-Lab experiment gone wild. Some others thought the revelation was a final condemnation of Evelyn's wolves. Others interpreted it as a warning that a whole road population might be breeding at night. Evidence that a much more deadly suspect was lurking in the shadows, clearing Frost and Willow of any wrongdoing. Shouts and entreaties merged from every angle, creating a clamor of demands to increase force surveillance. The mayor beat his head repeatedly in an attempt to enforce shoot-on-site regulations or to organize rescue teams to find the beast. Gavel's face turned white with anxiety as he made an unsuccessful attempt to bring order back through. Evelyn experienced a wave of relief and fear at the devastation caused by the wolves she had never posed a threat because they were raised with such care, and now the evidence was available to the public. However, if this hideous beast was really wreaking havoc on the periphery, it might frighten the already frightened residents. To take drastic, even deadly, actions that could accidentally result in her wolf being taken away when the meeting ended in. She shared a somber glance with Emily and Jack, recognizing without uttering a word that the time for half measures had concluded. It was more important to consider how and whether peace might be restored before terror, rather than whether her wolf were secure. Swallowed out every glimmer of sympathy and reason that was hidden under the commotion and the flashing picture of the forest appeared to be silently brooding, waiting for the next move in a standoff between the beast and the projection screen. As the scene was prepared for a final show, innocence and terrifying shadows coexisted. Confrontation 1, where Evelyn's steadfast link with her wolf and the unidentified predator terrorized the frantic townspeople. Would the collision definitively determine if humanity and wildness could coexist in the same world without consuming? Another nightfall brought a restless silence that descended upon a clearing on the town's outskirts only. A few nervous locals had gathered outside Evelyn's residence, some carrying weapons on their shoulders. The contentious town hall meeting earlier that day had concluded with everyone clutching flashlights as if they were lifelines. A commotion that left the neighborhood in a frenzied state of anger and dread. Discovery of a massive, enigmatic predator prowling the forest only served to. No one wanted to wait for another cattle attack or disappearance. Thus the demand for quick action grew. Evelyn stood in the doorway of her cabin, her heart hammering at the call to protect our own at any costs. Ash let out a low growl, and the wolf's posture was tight, with its hackles up. Frost and Willow marched behind him, imitating his, their ears pressed forward to hear the faint sounds coming from the woods. Anxiety as far-off flashlight beams flickered across the pine trunks, accompanied by the piercing crackling of walkie-talkies, and it wasn't the cool night air that made her feel cold, but from a knowledge that a vigilante hunt was taking place outside her gate. If the men outside came into contact with, if they saw a big canine in the dark, they might not wait to recognize it. Building all day since the researchers' video of the abnormally huge figure skulking close. The illicit logging locations, but some people thought the footage demonstrated Evelyn's wolves weren't guilty. Validated their darkest suspicions on a whole population of hideous animals. Ash, Frost, and Willow were captured in the storm and singled out as scapegoats in A. As Evelyn hurried to get her wolves in their enclosure, she lamented the timing of the drama they never requested to be a part of. She checked the cameras she had put in the hopes of capturing footage after making sure every gate and latch was closed. A brief sight of something larger, darker, and far more frightening than herself. Evidence that could avert catastrophe. Meanwhile, as the search teams dispersed a party under the leadership of a grim-faced farmer. Every time there was a disturbance in the brush, the small deer trail's eyes darted suspiciously, and another cluster included A brazen local who was notorious for his loud threats against the wolves searched an ancient fire road. Every now and then, a gunshot was heard, reverberating through the pines, but no triumphal cries reached her cabin, and Evelyn grimaced at each. She gritted her jaw, picturing the heartache if one of the bullets had reached Willow or Ash Frost. Fists against the annoyance of not being able to keep them safe beyond her yard's boundaries in the darkness merely. Jack, unarmed, established a modest observation point beyond her property line. He brought his camera in the hopes of catching the elusive creature if it materialized and recording proof that could clear him. Evelyn wolves might change public opinion with just a brief video clip. His breath dropped in the cold air as he heard the town directing its alerts away from her troop. Through his lens, he saw the bobbing lights of searchers as branches snapped under the weight of invisible forces in the dark. looked like fireflies, and their frenetic movements indicated their anxiety and sincere wish for a resolution in the silence of the forest, each sound amplified by a twig CCK. Evelyn's pulse sped when Ash's snarl broke the calm, bringing Frost and Willow into tight, low stances. It may be an inexperienced predator getting closer, emboldened by the noise, or a stupid hunter lured to their enclosure by the. With caution, wolf silhouettes went outside with a flashlight in one hand. Ash stayed, she ordered, her tone a blend of firmness in her chest and hand. Despite the strain, the wolf complied with authority and begged with hesitation. Swept through him abruptly, a startled shout emerging from the depths of the blackness of the pines, followed by a. Evelyn struggled to understand the words amid the cacophony of intense radio talk. Regarding movement, the big figure lost perspective, and then a single terrified. A gunshot pierced the night, and if it hit one, her blood became cold. Of her wolves, she might not learn about it until the next morning, if at all. A series of curses and heavy smashing through the bush were followed by another shot, and then there was silence. The silence that descended felt more perilous than any roar, a void where the next noise would be heard. Possibly heartbreak. Jack Trong, who was crouching next to a mossy wood, was able to maintain his. Only brief movements were captured by the camera, rolling his lens and scanning in the MC. Shape that might possibly be 8 or 9 feet long and slink amongst the firs if the scale were. According to the faint moonlight, it had a long, slender coat. As fast as it appears, a strong green glow reflects from eyes that appear black as coal, seemed to disappear, leaving just the sound of strained breathing on the walkway. Behind it, a shaky young searcher lurched into Jack's line of sight, while scurrying over fallen branches and muttering ramblingly about eyes gleaming in the darkness with no reference to Evelyn's wolf. Back at the enclosure, Evelyn pressed her with fear at whatever had come across his path. Feeling the wolves' soft nuzzles as they pressed back against the wire fencing, their palms were shook by the bullets. Even though it had made her uneasy, she talked in soothing, quiet tones and threatened to cry. In the back of her mind, this was the moment she had long feared. The stage was set for any frontal conflict between a forest mystery and the terrified townspeople. Mistake could turn deadly if the night came to a close without a human wolf, or otherwise, it would be a minor miracle, but she felt a change in the storyline. Although bullets were fired, there was no jubilant declaration of a slain wolf or a huge beast. That the unidentified predator was a crafty foe who was not the kind to loiter where bullets flew or be readily cornered. As search parties reassembled, their anxious faces lit by flashlights, confusion lingered in the chilly air. There was no sign of Evelyn's wolves in the returning gloom, nor was there any indication that the animals was missing or in danger. The packs were just giving off the unnerving sense that something big and elusive was following the same trails as. One slip increased human tension even further, making them poised like a delicate glass sculpture. Before any truth was found, Ash and Frost or Willow may be killed by a single tragic shot from a shaking hand. But if a brief moment of clarity appeared whether the actual offender was captured on camera, or if a witness came forward with conclusive evidence that the woodland caught between dread and reality may rescue the wolves from the burden of baseless accusations. Roiled with unseen currents of possibilities as dawn edged into the last act of this developing drama. If anything, the tension hanging to the woodland did not lessen as the sky was painted in delicate shades of gray and purple. The tense truce between Evelyn's wolves and the worried townspeople felt more precarious than ever as gunfire from the hunt from the night before was still fresh in people's minds, causing a general feeling of fear. Some of the more resolute townspeople waited with rifles or built impromptu fire pits close to the forest entrance. They looked at each other uneasily, unsure if the threat they were hunting was genuine or if their. Evelyn's own terror had summoned a specter of growling shadows, but had not slept. She patrolled her fenced-in area in the long hours before dawn, making sure Ash Frost and even when Willow was secure inside, the wolves continued to pace tensely in the dark. In the silence, their big paws every stride sounded abnormally loud, and their keen eyes observed Evelyn as if requesting confirmation that the unidentified predator had clearly decided not to confront her pack or the search parties. After a terrible error, she silently prayed for daylight as someone continued to shoot at movement in the dark, wishing it would ease tensions before a new round of misplaced retaliation emerged soon after the sunrise officer. When Ryan showed up, his somber expression warned Evelyn that there wasn't much peace and that the night's unsuccessful hunt had not ended the disagreement, and Evelyn, Emily, and a few of the town's most. In calm tones, he conveyed the few details discovered during the frantic hunt. Near the logging trails, a number of armed men had spotted what appeared to be a gigantic skull, but the monster slipped away into the trees. Several had attempted to shoot, but no one had been fatal. If another night went by without clarity, their anxiety and aggravation would only grow as they conversed with Jack. Showed up at the door of the cabin with dark circles under his eyes and the camera he had been holding for the previous few hours, examining video shot in the gloom in an effort to find a single, conclusive frame that made clear Evelyn's wolves. He acknowledged that some of the photos merely showed half silhouettes and flitting motions, none of which were clear enough to serve as unquestionable proof. If I can't demonstrate what's actually out there, I can't establish the wolves are innocent, he murmured. His voice was filled with irritation, reflecting the claustrophobic tension that pervaded the town. Resolution but failed to provide a simple answer all morning, using the phrase, It was only a matter of time until the unidentified predator struck again, before a nervous vigilante tried to defuse the situation by confusing Evelyn's wolves for the monster in the trees. Crisis. In an attempt to address the growing tensions, community officials scheduled an emergency town hall meeting on that afternoon. Dread into productive conversation as the midday light rose, increasing adrenaline, and the whole community was on high alert due to dread, and moms kept. Storekeepers locked doors early, their kids were indoors, and even the daily grind was overtaken by it. In light of the implied sense of approaching conflict, Evelyn took a silently painful choice. Because the earlier rumors of ideal sanctuaries had led to misguided suspicion, she couldn't risk the death of an innocent wolf. Nowhere, but she made the decision that it was time to get in touch with more extensive specialized institutions located far beyond the region. Resources for the responsible handling and upkeep of 3 bonded adult wolves. With shaking fingers, she called each number, writing messages and sending pictures that meticulously described the pack's history and the unstable situation in her hometown. Every call made her feel as though she should give up. Willow and Ash Frost almost choked her with shame, but if it meant rescuing them from a terrified corner, then, thus, she had to be ready to give up her own bond. But she was unaware that a new player had entered the scene. That a reputable wildlife researcher from a distant university was captivated by the circulating stories this afternoon. She passed the hours before the town hall in a composed manner, anticipating the arrival of a gigantic hybrid with advanced equipment, gathering to examine footprints, droppings, and Jack's incomplete recordings. She came to the depressing conclusion that whatever was haunting the forest was bigger than a typical wolf, showed extraordinary stealth, but she couldn't find any indications of a territorial overlap. Despite its promise, Evelyn's pack to the recent livestock killings stayed too circumstantial to calm the rage of the town's more belligerent voices, who longed for a concrete target will hold the fateful meeting held in the little auditorium accountable. As Officer Ryan entered the platform, surrounded by the wildlife researcher and a few others, silence descended upon the audience. Tension among the community leaders appeared to build up in the room's corners like shadows, waiting for an explosion to happen. As the researcher outlined her initial results, stressing that the enigmatic organism posed a unique and unconnected hazard. Many onlookers listened to Evelyn's wolves with circumspect interest, but others gleamed doubtfully, their arms clenched tightly, refusing to let there. When Evelyn stood up to speak, her wolves' presence was palpable, as though they were standing at her side. In shaky, earnest tones, she described Ash Frost and Willow as having GR. Her eyes glistened with the pain of perhaps losing them. Yet she transformed the orphan cubs into devoted, strong friends. Didn't ask for preferential treatment based solely on reason. and her trembling caused the entire audience to go silent. Nevertheless, a few angry murmurs rose from the audience, feeding a whirlpool of fear that was about to. The true turning point was when a local orchard owner, who had been a mute observer until then, reluctantly rose to recount how, 2 nights prior, she had seen a huge black-furred creature during a late-night encounter. Someone considerably too big to be Evelyn's subadult wolf roaming around her land. She was completely chilled by the creature's bright eyes and menacing stature. This place felt nothing like the when I met wolves at her house. She admitted that her voice was shaky and that she was whispering through. For some in the crowd, it was the first hard evidence of a very distinct threat that, despite being straightforward, the orchard owner's remarks challenged the prejudice aimed at. The gathering teetered on a precarious edge as Evelyn's pack changed the debate's temperature, either leading to a beneficial strategy to apprehend or drive the unknown beast away, protecting Ash Frost and Willow from unnecessary. In that last silence Evelyn experienced, blame or the animosity may yet erupt into a final, irreversible act of violence. Tears filled her eyes as she recognized that her neighbor's capacity to see past fear now held the key to their future. The stage was set for a choice that would have an impact much beyond this tiny town's borders, deciding not just the wolves' future, but also if a tenuous hope of coexistence could survive in the final encounter between the primal conflict between humans and the wild. When the woodlands settled into a nearly oppressive silence, as if holding its breath during a moonless, windless night. By this point, Evelyn had been caring for the 3 orphan wolf cubs, Ash Frost and Ash Frost, for 5 years. After surviving close to death, Willow and the children had developed into majestic adults that inspired both wonder and fear. The pack had flourished under Evelyn's steadfast loyalty despite the tragedies and unending suspicion, but the seething animosity. People from some communities had never really disappeared, but now all of the unresolved anxieties and long-suppressed tensions came together. In a single instance that would put to the test both the possibility of coexistence between the wolves and human and wild, a number of desperate cries were made that night about something that was attacking animals once more, but this time in a risky location on the town's edge. Several reports suggested there were stories about a massive, dark-furred beast that was far larger than a normal wolf. A boy had come across the scene while strolling home along the edge of the woodland, only to run away in terror when the beast unleashed his fury. A guttural growl as the child swiftly repelled a local search team. Mothers secured their homes as hunters prepared rifles and flashlights, and the community fell silent as if everyone was expecting the worst as the old charges reappeared in the midst of the pandemonium. What if Evelyn's wolves are at last returning to their savage tendencies? While others maintained that the pack was locked, Evelyn sensed the night's stress in her bones and hurried to find the other perpetrator away at her land. Confirmed that Willow and Ashing Frost were secure in their enclosure. She discovered them pacing there. On evenings like this, golden eyes seemed to always feel trouble as they stared at the dark line of trees beyond the fence. She made the decision to go out before it materialized, confident that they were still safe. In an effort to help identify the true threat, she had logs and time-stamped video footage that may demonstrate her wolves' innocence if required. But she was concerned that an armed mob on adrenaline might not wait for proof. She gathered her phone, flashlight, and all of her bravery and slipped away into the night. She saw the search team a mile from her cabin, next to a clearing shaded by a stand of pines. A loose circle of flashlight-wielding people joined them, their guns gripped in nervous hands. She looked for footprints or any indication of a struggle, but all she heard was the quiet strain in each ragged breath. And then abruptly, a frenzied bleat disturbed the quiet somewhere between. Lights swiveled toward the shadows, where another sheep was being attacked, and the party ran ahead, around a bend in the path, and reached a tiny clearing lit by flickering beams that showed a tremendous shape looming over a fallen ewe, its muzzle dark with new. It was bigger than normal, with crimson eyes that gleamed a ferocious green in the artificial glare. According to the most alarmist predictions, a monster body easily dwarfed Evelyn's enlarged wolf muscles. For a few moments, It stared at the surface of a thick layer of black fur. Intruders. There was a ragged silence. Nobody dared to move. And then someone started a riot. Shot in a panic, grazing a tree stump, and the monstrous beast screamed in defiance before leaping into the deeper. After eventually cornering their target, the searchers hurried after it, their hearts racing with a mixture of terror and triumph. Elusive villain, but they were quickly engulfed by the vegetation in the clearing. Evelyn's heart thudded, but it was empty save for the dead sheep and the dispersed silence of those left behind. Observed a creature like this one, the savage gleaming in its eyes, the scales on its shoulders, and the predatory manner it moved. If these men cornered it, their ingenuity revealed a terrible presence. She gritted her teeth and recalled her walled confinement, where she could only pray, knowing that confrontation was all but certain. So nobody would shoot Ashmy Frost or Willow out of ignorance as revenge because they thought a wolf was. A wolf, driven by fear and a final glimmer of will, she fled following the search party ignored the cries of a few survivors who advised her to retreat, and the jungle engulfed her in a. Over the throb of her heartbeat, she heard distant cries and the crack of undergrowth amid a tapestry of shadows and partially visible figures. The second shot was followed by a frantic roar and a clamor of cries as the echo of another weapon discharged. That caused her blood to run cold, accelerating her pace as she ripped through a patch of jagged branches, oblivious to the sting. Scratches on her arms before she exploded into a hollow where a sight of near death was exposed by flickering flashlights. A face-off broke out after the monstrous creature circled behind the search group, shutting off their escape route. Wide-eyed, pointed weapons and terrified men were aimed at the beast, who was pacing back and forth like a devil in a corner. Evelyn stumbled forward, ready to yell a warning, her massive teeth threatening her silently. A person stood at her side, Jack breathing, as a nearby stir caused her to twist. With a hard camera in hand, he recorded every second of his terrified gaze. He gasped, gazing at the deadly tableau, and she nodded, swallowing a wave of nausea. We must get them out of there. It wasn't as simple as signing of guilt. Rather, they were confronted with a terrifying peril that none of them had adequately anticipated. A savage bark suddenly broke out, and the beast lunged in a slight display of anger, causing one. When one of the soldiers fired the bullet, it missed wide and struck a tree trunk. When it became evident that fear had driven them all to the verge of catastrophe, it was too late for compassion or reason to intervene. Still exist in this place where primal terror reigned, and there was a sudden rush of activity from. 3 slender figures raced into the clearing behind Evelyn, and Ash Frost and Willow sprang out of the darkness that has escaped or been released in a desperate attempt to assist the crowd gasped as the weapons swung erratically between the newly arrived wolves and the monstrous monster. Evelyn's voice, trapped in her throat, unable to stop them, but the wolves looked away from the soldiers and the firearms. A challenge amongst apex predators in that a monstrous invader with heightened hackles and low, resonating growls. The last distinction between salvation and condemnation became hazy during the electrified standoff on the brink of destruction. Every frightened pack was under pressure to establish its innocence or even to survive this confrontation. The whole forest silenced for a single, brief pulse, creating a memorable moment in which the mother fears the predator and the predator fears the mother. Of all confrontations was on the line as Ash Frost, Willow, and the other 3 wolves appeared out of the shadows. The forest appeared abruptly in the clearing where a forest seemed to tighten its hold on every breath and heartbeat. The encounter between the armed townspeople and the gigantic predator was as shocking as Evelyn's previous choice to. A moment of raw suspension occurred when they were adopted beneath the dim light of flashlights and the shaky aim of weapons. Grasp, Evelyn and everyone else there sensed the enormity of what was going to occur. A final decision over whether a wild bond or human fear would decide. The Ash, the pack's biggest and most dominant member, took one stride forward, lowering his head and baring his. Frost and Willow were at his sides, their eyes fixed on the massive beast that had frightened the outside, as though they had decided to fight this unidentified threat, the monstrous predator, as a group. Its black, matted fur and its stance that went beyond normal canines faltered for the smallest moment. Taken aback by the wolves' approach, it raised its head. In just 10 seconds, they locked eyes in a primal challenge. The armed guys and the circulating reports about the missing animals overshadowed everything else. The pack's devotion to Evelyn and to one another solidified in a unified front during the panic that had grown over months. Front prepared to defend the area they acknowledged as their own. Even if the men had prepared for a shootout was frozen in place, unsure whether to aim at Ash's pack or the perplexity of the monstrous predator. And hesitant amazement appeared on their faces after they had been blaming Evelyn's wolves for so long. Evelyn's breath shuddered in her lungs as she was unexpectedly protected by them. She called softly to her wolves, asking them not to fight to the death, but her voice was scarcely audible. She didn't give any explicit orders, but her presence served to stabilize the pack, and she could see Ash's muscles tense. Each of them is conflicted between their deep-rooted caution around others and the tremor in Willow's eyes and Frost's pranks, and the natural urge to protect their territory, but their shared connection with her, the person who had nursed them back from abandoned cubs to strong adults who appeared to keep them in check and stop a wild attack. The monstrous thing, for its part, hissed a final warning, blood still fresh on its muzzle, which could lead to disaster. Its sharp eyes darted between the armed men, the petrified watchers, and the sheep it had previously claimed, encroaching wolves that now posed a threat to its prey. Then it turned and charged into the deeper woods. The town's residents let out a series of curses and shocked yells, but there was not a single shot that followed. However, everyone in the gathering realized at that crucial moment that firing mindlessly into the night may seal more. Ash let out a faint cry in the startled hush that followed, indicating one tragic fate. With a roar of stubborn defiance, the wolves slowly turned to face the spectators. Men with half-lowered weapons looked back with a mix of relief and lingering terror. Every ear throbbed with blood, and many were ready to blame these very animals. Were struggling with deep unease at being shielded by them, but even more startling was the understanding that in rescuing people from a different predator, Ash, Frost, and Willow had laid, revealed that they were a pack rather than the savage killers the locals had envisioned. Dedicated to Evelyn and, thus, to her community, Evelyn hastened to usher her wolf back toward her cabin, her heart in her throat. Trembling from the last of the adrenaline, she silently praised each of them while threatening to cry at the corners of her eyes. Vision, the surrounding forest appeared to exhale, defusing the situation without a single gunshot or other deadly act. Just the force of presence and an implicit, subliminal alliance between the men and spectators. Scattered, but no one could dispute the enormity of what they had seen. The dangerous wolves they had before denounced had interfered to thwart a greater threat rather than out of heedless hostility. When dawn eventually arrived, its soft rays showed a clearing that was still tense, but the fear that had been there before dawn had. Jack gently shared as he stepped out of the shadows, still holding the camera. The video he had taken of Ash protecting himself from the monstrous predator as the men hesitated to shoot spread around. The wolf story was reframed by the video on social media and local networks. Viewers who had previously detested them were astounded by their steadfast position, which did not include attacking others but rather safeguarding them during a crisis. The collective started to take the place of the fear that had previously controlled the town. Considering how fear and prejudice can cause a community to lose sight of an animal's actual nature in the days that follow, officers resumed their investigation into the unidentified predator, which some people thought had escaped farther into the uninhabited woods or might have died from wounds on farms. Stayed vigilant, but the call for Evelyn's wolves to be killed or relocated significantly reduced the number of. The recollection of the evening served as a humble lesson on the intricacy of wild animals and the fallacious presumptions people give in to dread. But Evelyn, for her part, felt a deep sense of relief and wonder. She had risked all for the wolves' attachment with her, believing that they wouldn't turn back to nature, reed and claw and tooth, and now she witnessed them not only make it through the last conflict, but also refute the pessimists who had declared her insane years prior, when she was inundated with regrets from neighbors who had previously mocked her choice when local authorities threatened to take away. Even the land developer, who had long argued for clearing the area of large predators, quietly withdrew from looking out one morning at Ash. His aggressive rhetoric did not, however, leave a lingering fatigue in the air. As they played under the pines, Evelyn was overcome with thankfulness for how far they'd come. She had been a lone figure 5 years prior, saving 3 orphan cubs who were mocked and branded as A. Now, she and her wolves stood together as a living example of the hazard to public safety that exists between the human world and the wild can be reconciled by compassion, cautious management, and a readiness to trust that the difficult experiences they had created a closer bond than. For once, the biggest skeptics were the ones who had to own that they were mistaken about her. We appreciate you being with us the entire time on this amazing journey of bravery, devotion, and the unbreakable tie between a lady in her wolf pack, if Evelyn's tale, and Ash Frost and Willow's incredible metamorphosis had motivated. Please enjoy this video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below. Your support in the comment section below is essential to our goal of fostering understanding to safeguard wildlife worldwide. Stay tuned for more heartwarming tales that demonstrate how even the most untamed souls can share in remarkable human connection that dispels preconceptions and demonstrates that optimism may arise even in the most hopeless situations. Only perceives danger.